Let me first introduce my esteemed colleague, Christina Van Houten. She has over 20 years of business strategy and technology management experience. As SVP of Market Strategy and Product Management, Christina leads a $500 million R&D portfolio as part of Infor's $3 billion business that covers over 100 countries and nearly 100,000 customers worldwide. Her organization drives and supports the entire product lifecycle for Infor. Prior to joining us in 2011, she worked at IBM, Oracle, and other entrepreneurial firms. She also sits on the advisory board of several emerging technology companies. She received an MBA at University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. She also has a BA in Government and Theology from Georgetown University. She's originally from Oklahoma and now resides in Boston. So welcome, Christina, and thank you for doing this fireside chat with us, and welcome to Bruno from the networking group.
Christina, thank you for being with us tonight. We usually let our guests introduce themselves, so if there is anything you want to add.
I thank you for asking me to be here, and thanks to everybody for spending time. I know everybody's really busy. You have lots of ways that you can spend your time, so this is a really neat opportunity for me, and I'm particularly grateful to my colleagues who decided to join. Thanks you guys for being here, and if you've heard my story too many times, I'm sorry if you have to hear it again. I think the intro did do a pretty good overview of my career. I guess the one thing I'll add is a funny quote that one of my roommates from college had, which is, "You were the last person I ever thought would be successful." And I think, and another quote from a woman in a group that I was speaking to recently said, "Your imperfection gives me hope." And so hopefully, I think that I've been so surprised and delighted with the way that my career has evolved and the things that I get to do and the people I get to work with. And while I started as very much a liberal arts kind of save the world person, never imagined that I would be good in a technology-oriented environment. It's just given me everything that I could ever want intellectually, socially, and just the diversity of what we get to do every day is really an extraordinary opportunity that you don't get in many careers. And so I feel lucky the way things have gone.
Sure, thank you. My name is Bruno Scap. I'm a co-founder and host of Business and Technology of Greater New York. I've been in IT for almost 20 years. I focus on IT strategy and innovation and how to manage technology strategically to create competitive advantage. So tell us more about your career evolution and how did you end up in tech ultimately?
Yeah, so when I first graduated, I was doing public policy work and was very focused on inner city business development, low-income housing, particularly economic development for women. And I worked for the DC city government, I worked for the MacArthur Foundation, I worked for several campaigns. I went back to business school thinking that it would round out my skill set to continue doing that. And while I was in school, did a business plan for women's activewear apparel company, which makes no sense, especially in between the Save the World and technology career I ended up in. But a few people encouraged me to do it, and like a lot of things in life, if you don't know anything about them, you think, well, how hard can it be? And so I dove in, and even though it was kind of a non sequitur, it actually oddly ended up landing me in technology, because my first job in technology was working on kind of retail and fashion-oriented a platform to support kind of the full production and sales process, and that eventually landed me at Oracle, and kind of from there. So I initially, the first, I was probably number 10 in a company that ended up being 350 employees, that went from pretty much zero revenue when I started to, well, probably close to 100 million in revenue. And that was about the time that Oracle bought us. And what's interesting is that the president of Infor was someone that when Oracle came in and bought us, I don't know if any of you guys have been bought, but it's sort of an interesting dynamic because you see people sort of freak out, and say, I'm out of here, I'm not, I don't like these big guys. And then you get some who just sort of say, I don't really have to do anything because nobody's really paying attention and there's just so much chaos. And I was kind of at a weird point in my personal life. I had 2 kids that were under 3. One was really difficult. I went from being pretty senior in this small company and had an office and had a team to all of a sudden I found myself sitting next to a printer and surrounded by file boxes and working for someone that I never imagined that I would be working for. I thought they'd be working for me. And so you kind of have these moments when you say, I can't believe I'm really starting over again. And at a time where I just wasn't sure the economics made sense, that it made sense for my family. And so, but I said, what the heck? And I built this model kind of from the ground up. I don't know how I got all this data, but I thought, I'm going to do kind of a state of the business for this thing that has never before existed. And Oracle had bought 4 companies. And I kind of said, all right, here's where the opportunity is, here's where the historical business has been, and here's, if I was running this business, here's what I would do with it. And I sent it just anonymously, basically, to the guy that's now Infor president. He was the head of our business unit at the time. And kind of the rest was history for me, because that moment of deciding to dig in and do something that no one else was doing, that I knew was needed by the business, kind of created a connection for me with people that were senior who then kind of pulled me along. And so I learned a lot in that process, and that's kind of been the pattern, I think, that I've tried to sort of pursue over and over, is sort of when you end up in technology companies, especially when there's just so much change, is to really, and a lot of what we do is very intangible,
Yeah.
Especially if you're not writing code and you're not selling, you're not carrying a bag, how are you going to justify your existence every day? So I think for those of us, and I don't know how many of you guys are in this position, but for those of us that live somewhere in between the people who actually write code, make product, and those that are going on, feet on the street, I think there really can be kind of a discipline and a formula for how to make everyone in the company better, and I think make your job and the value that you add tangible.
Right. And tell us a bit about Infor and how the company has evolved.
Yeah, Infor is really interesting. It was, I think, the first decade of its existence, it was really a private equity-driven strategy, and it was a roll-up. And if you looked at Infor probably 7 or 8 years ago, and you Googled them on the web, the first thing that came up was ERP graveyard, I think, and or some, like 10 other links that were sort of related to that. And I think the private equity firm that bought it, initially there was sort of a formula around going after companies that had been successful, that had big customers and had done well, but everything in life has a curve, everything. And it was sort of looking for those companies that are on that curve where they had a trajectory, but they were just kind of at that point. And so they could be bought relatively inexpensively, but they had really strong maintenance annuity streams, and there was a real financial play there. But again, that had a curve for Infor itself, where that strategy only lasts for so long, because those customers, unless you're investing in their product and you're really truly engaged in investing in them as businesses, they're going to go look somewhere else. And so Charles Phillips, who's the current CEO, who was the president at Oracle, started here just over 6 years ago with the current management team. And the private equity firm that had driven that initial phase said, we need to be a product company. We need to pour a lot of money into R&D. We need to look at this really diverse portfolio that had hundreds of products, some overlapping, some distinct. We need to look at the industries where we have a strong legacy, the geographies that we have strength and a customer base. And from that, kind of that big, rich portfolio or pantry of ingredients, figure out where we're going to focus, what products are going to be go forward. At the same time, they initiated a new technology stack that had integration technology, a common UX, things like mobile, collaboration, analytics, and took all of those things that existed redundantly in the portfolio and then consolidated them into this kind of single platform. And you can imagine that doing that across what was hundreds of companies that had been bought in every country imaginable was hard, And so when I came in, it was the guy that I mentioned that I did that plan for by the printer surrounded by boxes. He called me. I had gone to this company called Netezza that was a data warehouse appliance. I don't know if any of you guys remember, but that was bought by IBM. But he called me because I think in his first weeks here, he realized how daunting. They knew what they wanted to do, but actually executing on that, given how diverse and dispersed the company was hard. And so he pulled me in to sort of start to see what the structure would be and which industries. We knew there were 12. It was going to be healthcare, public sector, food and beverage, aerospace and defense, automotive. I mean, all pretty distinct. And then assembling full solutions based on what those industries needed, what the market opportunity was, and then driving roadmap from that. So here we are 6 years later. And on top of that, on top of just thinking about the industries, integrating those solutions, building out last mile functionality, at the same time, there's this huge evolution to cloud, which 6 years ago was sort of out there with edge apps, but not at the rate that we see it now. I mean, just really in the last 2 years, I think we've all seen a major inflection point on that front. So we were that kind of coming at it at the same time we were doing major investment in sort of the industry pieces and the integration has led to just a really amazing time for us. And just a lot of things come together. And I was saying to some of the people we were talking to, we just had our major customer event last week. And it's always interesting. That's the sixth one that I've been to. So I almost wish I had kept a journal every year because each one of those things, even though they're big, like they tend to have a feeling, like there starts to be things that you hear over and over from the audience, and there's just sort of different sentiment. And for me, it's been really fun because, especially when you have a giant customer base, people get nervous. Like they're running their businesses on these core platforms and they want to change, but it is really difficult. And so I think what's neat is the conversation for us with our customers has finally changed from, wait a minute, what are you doing to me, to the credibility factor around what we've done and what we've built and how we're engaging has just completely changed the conversation to help me figure out how to do it, not, hey, you can't do this to me. So the thing beyond kind of the core development pieces one thing I think that's interesting about what we've been focusing on, and I think it's relevant for other enterprise software companies that I've been involved with, is that there's such a focus on feature function, all those kinds of the technical pieces that I think software companies tend to neglect all the things that go around that, and that really help companies get a real ROI and have a really good customer experience on top of the cool stuff that you're giving them. And I think a lot of times by forgetting that, the major investments that firms make in these cool things is essentially sort of lit on fire. So what we've been doing over especially the last year, is kind of deconstructing our entire customer experience process. Everything from how hard it is to just get a demo. I don't know if you wouldn't think, like, you're making products, you're releasing them, why is it so hard to get a demo up and running? And So we've been digging into kind of creating real standard versions of our products that you can click a button and get a 30-day trial. And certainly this is not a new thing in the industry, but again, it's something that was really just on sort of edge applications, like maybe CRM, and we're doing them kind of on these whole business platforms. The other thing that we were trying to do is bring things we all are familiar with as consumers. We all use Gmail and LinkedIn and Facebook, and they're continuously pushing new things to you. And it's not a big deal. We're all used to it. But enterprise software hasn't really worked that way. You know, you had to take people out of their jobs for weeks to learn how to use it, and it was just so disruptive. So we're really working on that. You log in, it's a new release, and how does that feel? You know, is somebody there? Is there sort of an automated way of making it feel like you know what you are doing, and makes it exciting that there's new capabilities and draws you into where you should go and how you can capitalize on it. And that there's just kind of all of these pieces that were, the third one actually beyond that is online help. And I'm sure that doesn't seem sexy at all, but online help, we do these 2 times a year innovation summits. And part of the reason I initiated it was because we were so dispersed and people were moving so fast. And I just wanted everybody to see what everybody else was doing. So we start on Monday, we go all the way to end of day on Friday, and people are in the Netherlands, they're in Sweden, they're in France, they're in Asia, they're in Philippines, they're in India, they're in the US. And everybody gets up and gets to show their stuff. And what's amazing is that you get people using the same technology and it ends up looking totally different. So it's an opportunity to really use peer pressure to kind of highlight who's done something really amazing and then figuring out how to propagate that to everybody else. But during those sessions, this team had done just tons of investment on their user experience and in their cloud infrastructure, and they were so proud of what they'd done, and I was too. And they're going through, and all of a sudden, and they said, oh, and then I go here to learn more in online help. And it was like, I have a record album code on it. It was like the record skipped, if you're old enough to remember records in somebody's basement. And it was like this screen from 1985, you know, it just juxtaposed to this whole other experience. And so it was this moment for me where I thought, oh my gosh, this is part of the product. And we have just let this thing, we had it in our organization. It was actually managed separately. It wasn't even in R&D. And so that prompted us to really change the way we thought of it. And now we have embedded videos and these guided workflows. We've been able to kind of achieve this replatforming of this old paradigm in really a matter of weeks or months on something in the past that would have taken a company eons to do. And that's kind of fun. To get to that point where you can have an idea about something and your technology's gotten good enough that you can kind of flip on a dime and really change the way you do business pretty quickly.
And the customers are much happier, I'm sure. You've probably seen a lot where people work hard, implement very cool, good, useful features, and then the customer says, well, this seems really hard to use, or how much time will I need to retrain my people? So
yeah, it's interesting that you say that about just uncovering what people are actually using and where they're getting tripped up. And that's yet another kind of new technology. I don't know if any of you guys are using anything like this, but that's something we've also just infused into our suite in the last 6 months. It's sort of like a one-way mirror where you can really get an insight into where people are going and what they're using, where you have performance problems, where you have kind of expected pathways and then sort of see the actual pathways. It enables, especially when you're introducing code at such a dynamic level, it's like you don't want to just keep throwing more and more code. You need an elegant way of kind of deprecating code and being kind of efficient about all of that at the same time that you're delivering this better front-end experience. And so we've actually, it's been really neat to be able to kind of bring both of those to bear at the same time, sort of the here's sort of what's happening and right in front of the user, and then sort of the behind the scenes look at what's going on with the user. And I think that when you have a myriad of people coming at you with, I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that, I think that can really help us with quick wins, injecting into the app in a dynamic way that we just really wouldn't be able to make sense of otherwise. But it also sort of underscores how different the paradigm is around developing, releasing and software and kind of engaging with your users. Yeah. It's been a really fun change for us. And I can see, having met with dozens of customers last week, they're really excited about it as well. And I think they see the power of it changing the way their business runs, because all of that stuff that was stressful for them and disruptive, once they kind of get over the hump, it completely changes the way that technology works for their business, more the way our phone works for us as consumers.
Right, yeah, that's great. What do you see as the key ingredients to success for leaders in technology organizations? How do you establish credibility, for example, and make a difference across multiple and diverse stakeholders?
You know, I was thinking about this one a lot coming into here, and one of the things I love about technology is that it's very much performance-based. You know, and even in big companies I've been in, there's a lot of opportunity to move up and move around and stand out. But even in big companies, I found you have to be really entrepreneurial. And it's pretty Darwinian too, which, you know, can be good and bad. But at our company, there's an opportunity to just come up and do something great and send it straight to the CEO. And the next day, the people that you were working for might be working for you. You know, and I don't think Infor is unique in that way. I love that about technology, and I think as a result, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about, especially if you're in this space between coding and selling. I think for leaders, it's really more about influence than it is about organizational structure. And the minute I see people get hung up on organizational structure or if they have budget or not, I know they've missed an opportunity. Because in the end, the people that really end up being the go-to people, it's not necessarily, at least in my experience, it doesn't necessarily tie to that. It's the people who really set out, have an idea about something they can create that's really going to change the business and make everyone around them better, and then figure out how to kind of propagate that throughout the organization and bring people along. And there are lots of things. One of the things I think that I've really tried to do and that gets underestimated, I think, is internal marketing, especially if you guys, some of you are in smaller companies, but when you're in big companies, bringing people along once you have an idea and you know it's the right thing to do, it's always harder to bring people along than you expect and get their heads where your head is. And so I think a lot of times I've just learned that it's really important to name things. I know it sounds sort of cheesy, but a lot of times, and there's a fine line between making it seem too fake, but I think if you can name things and be really good about setting dates and sort of saying, okay, we're all going to rally around this thing. And usually I really try to take the first step at actually doing the work myself to try to create something tangible that everybody else can see and sort of know where we want to go.
Right. It's kind of mini branding inside.
Yeah, mini branding inside, exactly. Yeah. Almost like a campaign around a project internally. Yeah.
Big technology gradient.
Yeah, exactly.
And in your experience, how can IT do a better job of making its top management aware of how it's adding value?
So, are you thinking IT in technology companies or IT in more bigger non-technology businesses?
Yeah, either way. Meaning, it seems still a lot of organizations or leadership treat IT or a big part of it as a cost center as opposed to something that can give you an advantage. So how do you see?
Well, I'll talk to what Infor has done, because I actually think what we've done over the last year or so is really interesting, because we had kind of typical IT. And we actually were running some of our old products, but really old versions of our products. And Charles Phillips, our CEO, started an initiative called Infor, and it was just this major push and investment to upgrade all of our solutions internally to our products. And at the same time he did that, he hired a leader here in Manhattan who's the Chief Business Innovation Officer. And you've seen or heard of some companies doing this. And until he did this, I really kind of thought, I would see articles about it, and it sort of seemed cliche, and it seemed to be the kind of the thing of the day. And I don't know if it's because we just ended up with someone who's so amazing doing this job. And Ann is nodding because we both, his name is Sharyar, I'm probably going to butcher his last name, Rafiamari. And he's truly, what's interesting is actually how important his personality is. He's just an unbelievable intellect, but his personality and the way that he has treated the business is just so extraordinary. And he just, what he's done in a year in terms of the volume of what he's rolled out for the company and the things that he has taken that were just total messes. Like our customer, you can imagine with all of these roll-ups and how many companies and how many customers we had, getting a single view of the customer. I mean, just some simple things like that. Like, what did they own? What versions did they have? What were they paying in maintenance? What was their sort of ongoing history and interaction with us? And we just launched this amazing thing, not only for us internally, but actually for our customers, so that they could see just a completely holistic view of their relationship with Infor. And that's just one example, but we're just revamping our entire HR system. It's just, it's made a huge difference in our company. And again, to your point about what can IT do to add value, I think and others in the room could maybe comment, because I think there's anybody who's from Infor here, even though we're from different parts of the company, know him well. It's someone who really sees their job as driving business change and meeting with business, and then just being really entrepreneurial about how technology is a means to an end to achieving whatever those business objectives are.
Right. What do you see as the next big thing in tech, and how should tech firms think about staying relevant in that context?
So I'll give a little plug for Infor on this, because we just had our customer conference last week, and we just announced something called Coleman. And for those of you that saw Hidden Figures, Coleman is named after Catherine Coleman, who did the math on some of the first space missions. An amazing movie if you haven't seen it. And if you haven't seen our video that was produced with a voiceover of our CEO, and her family was at our event last week, it was truly one of the most meaningful, moving things that I've ever seen. I've had lots of people say that they felt the same way. I don't know if the video will feel the same watching it online as it did being in the audience, but and what Coleman is a platform for voice and artificial intelligence brought together, layered on top of what is this kind of amazing infrastructure that's been built to handle end-to-end processes for a healthcare organization or an automotive manufacturer or the best brewers. I think we have 90% of beer manufacturers around the globe. So it's really about kind of capitalizing on those things that we've kind of hard-earned over a decade or two around the world, working with thousands of customers, and basically taking technologies that we're kind of familiar with as consumers, but injecting those on top of those platforms to change the way that they work and the way people work who use them. So I think those are probably the two big things that we're working on, and then continued maturity around our cloud infrastructure, the things that a lot of other companies have been working on, cloud, our analytics, collaboration, amazing user experience, mobile.
Yeah, okay. So for the final question, then we'll open it up. What advice would you give to someone going into a leadership position for the first time?
I really believe in, it's funny, there are different kinds of leaders, and we've all probably had people that are good or bad, and within the ones that are compelling, if I had to describe them, they weren't the same people. They were compelling for different reasons. And so it's always interesting, I think, to try to figure out how to cultivate your leadership style in a way that is genuine to you and kind of capitalizes on your unique capabilities. And I think there are a couple of things. One is kind of authenticity, and I know that word is overused, but being human and engaging with your team in a way that they trust you, and part of that, I think, is delivering on yourself and not just managing people, but diving in to projects and real work, and not just asking other people to do it, to really get engaged and create things on your own and help, and sort of setting an example that way. At the same time, you dig in and help them make their deliverables better. The other thing that I think is the hallmark of being a good leader, and I came up with this paradigm for my team, and they probably are so irritated with it, but I love 2x2s. I love any kind of cheesy business framework, but this one I thought, I kept having people come to me on my team and say, prioritize everything on my plate. I don't know what to work on. I have too much. And the reality is, especially in something as fast moving as technology, there's always going to be more to do than you have time to do it. There's always going to be less money than you want to do it. And so for me, I think one of the hallmarks of a good leader and just being a good employee is the ability to make good decisions. And I think part of that is at the intersection of, this is my 2x2, ambitious on one axis and achievable on the other. And I actually kind of work to plot my own things on kind of what ends up in those quadrants. I think things that are in sort of this achievable bucket on this side are things you should probably be doing every day and just sort of checking to make sure that you're doing them. And then there are these things that really kind of push you beyond what you're doing now. They're kind of new things that you're going to set a chart a course around and bring other people along. And then there's a bunch of things that maybe you'd want to do, like you want to run a marathon. I want to be a good singer. I wish I could play. I wish I could draw. I will never. I want to move back to Oklahoma. Those things are never going to happen, so just let those go. And that probably sounds too high level, but I really do think people struggle with that. And I think that if you can kind of come up as a leader with a paradigm for helping people make decisions and kind of spend their time judiciously, and then once they anchor on those things, really drive to something that they can show up and be proud of. I think a lot of times when you get spread too thin, you feel like they start to feel like they haven't done anything, and other people start to feel like that too. So I think to kind of get laser focused on a few things that in the end is going to make a difference in the organization and make a lot of other people better.
I think 2x2 is great, especially for those people who can't seem to make any decisions.
Right. Yep, exactly. Got to keep moving.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Let's open it
Thank you.
to the audience. Anyone have a question?
Hi, thank you again, and good evening. Kyle Barrios, formerly with Deloitte, now looking for new opportunities. And I'm just curious, have you read the book Hackers and Painters by Paul Graham?
No, it sounds like something.
A lot of what you're saying is so relevant even to the stories in that book. Is basically sort of essays from Paul Graham. He's one of the founders of Y Combinator and was a startup king back in his days. But talking about being agile and talking about listening to the customers and designing something that the customer will never use just rang so true to a lot of what is in his book. And I would actually recommend that to anyone here, that book, Hackers and Painters, just because it definitely teaches you and shows you that there's definitely more to achieve and more to do, regardless of your position and regardless of the infrastructure around you.
Does it get into, you're kind of hitting on something that's interesting too, about the idea of giving customers something that they never knew, they never asked for too.
Yeah.
And Nunzio, who's behind you, and I are always kind of thinking about, at some level, there's all these demands and people, they're big things that they're staring at them that they need, but also sometimes it's giving them something they never even imagined, and kind of figuring out how to balance those two.
Exactly, right on point. So I definitely recommend it when you have a moment. It's definitely a good read, but thank you again for your words.
Oh, thank you for the suggestion, yeah.
Because I'll drop my phone. But I had 2 questions. I guess the first one is around what sort of tools were you using to kind of analyze usage from your users on the back end? Just because that I think is a hard thing to do, is when you have clients that are very used to a certain type of software, to get them to move to new products.
It is, yeah, and
so
kind of
cultivate what you were using.
We partnered with a company called Pendo, and it's based in North Carolina. They're a great company, great product, and we have several of our products that have already integrated. What's interesting is we initially pursued them because we wanted to start these test drives, because we need to move our 100,000 customers to latest version, and so it was going to involve this really concerted effort to engage with the base and help them get comfortable with the latest release, which in a lot of cases, these people are running on things that are 10 years old. It's not just an upgrade, it's a paradigm shift. And so we felt like providing that experience to go into an environment, interact, and not just log into a shell of an ERP, because these products are huge, and really make it something that guided them through. And so we initially pursued them for that, because mainly to arm our telesales team to have a meaningful interaction with them. So you could see after day 1, did anybody log in? Or day 2 or day 3, they logged in, but they just went to this part of the app. But through that interaction with them, we realized that this secondary set of features around guided flows, the ability to put embedded video, the ability once you're actually in production, going through and you're doing drops like every week, that ability to make that interaction and that transition more smooth is part of what they do, as well as the kind of one-way mirror piece.
I guess the quick follow-up to that is, have you ever been in a situation where culturally within the organization you're in, they haven't realized that what the client asks for isn't always what the clients need? And how would you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, especially as big as we are here, we always struggle with that. And you get, especially because you have some people that have been here, they've spent their entire lives with their product. They may have been with the same product for 30 years. And then you have new, younger people coming in, and both are really valid. I mean, the people that really know these products and these industries bring a really amazing perspective and knowledge of the customer base, as do the newer, younger, fresh talent that comes in as well. And so I actually love, I think one of the things we haven't talked about yet, but it's just kind of like this whole people know about portfolio optimization and investments. I think that there's a great analog there with teams, and making sure when you have technology teams or product teams that you really, if there's a Venn diagram, there's sort of enough overlapping but enough distinct. And so that's what we try to do to kind of create a little bit of tension, is make sure that there's not just one product owner that's kind of just caring about the people that already bought the product, but is sort of forced to look at that as a portfolio with a portfolio of people that have different perspectives, which can be painful, but there are ways to do it effectively. I think we've tried. That's part of the discipline, especially, again, because we're located in so many different places and have so many stakeholders. We've really had to have a lot of discipline around those roadmap reviews, around candidate ROI, for everything, understanding what the ROI is and kind of talking through those trade-offs before we lock into a set of investments.
One last question.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Wanted to circle back to something you said earlier about there seems to be this trend in the IT field that if you're not writing code or doing sales, then what are you really doing? I come from the project management field, so it was really critical what you said right after that, which is there's all of these other intangibles. So I was hoping you could speak a little bit about how you see project management thinking affecting Infor as a business, and how involving some more of that in these larger IT institutions could be beneficial to the field.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think I even underestimated the importance of it before I came here. And it's amazing. The only way, and especially the bigger you get, but project management takes maybe you can take a group of B, C players and make them A, B with project management. And part of it is getting to consistency. Part of it is getting to on-time delivery. Part of it, and a lot of it is quality. And it's just, and also it's kind of that internal, like our project management plays a really big role in that internal marketing piece. So whenever we do something, we really make an effort to put a portal together, to organize the information in a way that it's consumable, to kind of push it out to stakeholders over time. And it's the glue. It really is the glue for the organization. And what's interesting, in some cases, I've seen people sometimes bristle when project management is kind of getting in their grill, but then there's always this point where they realize that they're a friend, and they're really there to make them better in the end. And I have a couple of people on my team who are PMPs, who if you took them out, it would basically be like taking an engine out of a car. Like, you'd have a car sitting there on the lot. It would look like a car. You could open it. You'd sit in it, but it wouldn't go anywhere. So I really believe in the discipline. But I've also seen really good product program managers and some that aren't. And I think that the key is getting enough domain that everybody around you feels like you are a contributor, and you're not just sitting there with a tablet and you're just checking a list. That you are an invested member of the team. You see the board, you know the business, you're anticipating things, you're diving in and helping them get things across the finish line. And what's funny is, and you probably realize this, when you have, we have, 75 active products now, and there's a bunch that are sort of less active. So then there's 500 product managers and other people around the world creating stuff. And every time we have a big initiative, like, okay, everybody, we're all going to redo roadmaps, or we're all going to do business plans right now. And the same people every time get it done right away. It's flawless. And then the same people are always the stragglers, and it's nothing like you gave them a template and it looks like it came from a different company, and then there's like all these people in between that you kind of. But I think the magic is kind of what I usually do, and you probably have done this too. I was talking about peer pressure earlier. Those ones I talked about earlier that are always the ones that nail it and actually take whatever you gave them as guidance and then take it to even a better level. I always start with them and get it right, and then I hold them up as the example, and then use them to kind of drive excellence with everybody else. I don't know if that answered your question.
Absolutely, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.